too heavy for the morning. We should have actually had a dose of caffeine before this, but hey, you don't choose how the world works. So here we are. So just to give you some context, who here is familiar with X-Risk? Who here is familiar with FHI? Who here knows Anders? Okay. Anders Sandberg? Okay, all right. So full disclosure, so a good few years ago, me and Anders had a conversation at FHI. We looked at that point in time, like how would a hybrid risk look like? What it meant was like we have bio risk, and Department of Homeland Security has a protocol to reduce the risk. And there's cyber risk, and different sets of people have different protocols around it. This was just a coffee conversation which resulted in like a write-up of a paper, which is like, we thought about how to break it. And a few years passed, and I've been thinking about providing all the kind of security, proofs to people who normally don't do ZK and FHE and MPC and TEE for breakfast, right? Who we normally call scientists, who looks at normal problems that really people care about rather than abstract mathematical problems. So this was the result of it. We have a talk. So as I was describing, day one, we thought about hybrid risk, which is like in the world of biology, you have a bunch of sequences, and if you change the sequences, the outcome could be different. There have been measures put in that world to constrain this. And typically what it means is like your bio risk chain is like bad intentions, bad idea, a bad sequence. So everybody here understands sequences, right? DNA, RNA. Yep, okay. Can I have a show of hands in terms of people who know DNA, RNA, and oh, good. Okay, I'm in a good land. So in the cyber world, we have a similar thing. It's kind of similar to the physical world. If you were to attack some place, you recon, you select a method. I'm sure you've all heard in the news the signal gate, right? Where US senior people described what they were planning to do, their order of delivery, what they're going to deliver. That's literally what that would imply in that sense of speaking. So if you were to attack something in a cyber sense, you would actually do a recon, you decide what you want to do, how you want to deliver, and then you activate, and then you'll have an outcome, right? So in a way of speaking, you will scan the target. So normally they have things called scanners. Then they will recognize a fingerprint as to what is running on the other side. Then you decide what your 0-day is, and you have a mechanism to deliver your 0-day, and you take over the assets. So, this happened, a conversation that I had with Anders happened a good few years ago, and time passed, and in the interim, a whole bunch of things changed, right? And things that we thought were 1 in a 100-year occurrence happened in between, and we can call that COVID, right? So typically, if you were to talk about pandemics, bioterrorism, disruptive research, and stuff like that, nobody would give a shit. And suddenly what happened is COVID really reset our norms, right? And it also showed us what the real life effects are in terms of health, economies, and security. Is there anyone in this room who wasn't locked down in COVID? Like, as in like where you in one country where you had heavy restrictions on you? Oh, is that you, Sharad? You were in the UK? You say you didn't? Okay, I would have a different opinion. I got stuck in London for a year. I was really, really upset with that. So, okay, so, and literally that goes to the next, thought I had, was just like, what would be an example of this? Can an adversary come up with a virus, right? Yeah, if it's a conspiracy theorist, you would definitely say COVID was a virus somebody created in some lab, and there you go. So you've actually gone through in real life what me and Anders were thinking about in FHI over a cup of coffee after a set of possible threat scenarios, right? So, Now imagine time has moved on and things are getting worse and worse. So the thing I think has really changed the dynamic, right? Really changed the dynamic is the next bit. But I just want to give you some idea about some of these things, right? So when the initial conversation happened, this is almost like 10 years ago now, the access to sequences and devices of that sort. So if you wanted to get a CRISPR kit, you would have to put in a bit of an effort. Now I think you pretty much could get most of the things straight up. You could actually submit a sequence to some of these places and they will, companies in the US, and they will send you the sequenced thing back, right? And cyber tools in that sense, you actually have like, black markets for 0 days. What I mean by this is like you could be a security researcher and you find a 0 day. So everybody knows what a 0 day is, right? Can I have a show of hands? Okay, that's like a couple of people. Okay, so the thing is, imagine you have I'm assuming you have iOS or, as in like iPhones or Android phones. They produce security updates. But there are lots of bugs for which you don't have a bug fix for. And this is available in the market. And it's called 0 days. It's like, those bugs exist in your current machine. And you can actually get a vector for that in that sense. So that's what it is. So, and the last of the bit is like, I know this sounds a bit cheesy and cheeky. Crypto markets really enable this ability to outsource expertise in that sense. You can go to a market and hire the expertise and pay the person in crypto. I know this is, you would have thought the reverse would be the effect, but yeah, everything works both ways. So yeah, and one of the things that happened in between, even though everybody in FHI thinks about existential risk, the risk of AI when combined with all the other two pieces wasn't really thought through. This really changed the game. When I say really changed the game, I'll walk you through and then you will understand what I mean. Everybody here knows Anthropic, right? Okay, so Anthropic has Anthropic AI safety levels. And I would take a moment to get you to focus on level 2, right? And I have to say this, I created most of the deck when I saw this thing and I was like, damn, right? They had thought a bit about it. But I want to prove them wrong now. Because when you listen to all my talk, you will say the ASL level 2 is not where we are. We are probably in ASL level 3. Okay, this is my line of reasoning. The simplest line of reasoning, if there's a single takeaway for any one of you from this talk, is at this moment in time, we are not living in ASL 2. We are most likely living in ASL 3. Okay? That's the start of the describe how we could use cryptographic primitives, a lot of these primitives that's available to us, both in a decentralized manner or in what I describe as a centralized manner. So I'll try give you some intuitions. Mark after me is going to talk about zero knowledge stuff, so I will just hand wave. And I don't know who's going to talk about MPCs and who's going to talk about FHEs. Is anybody talking? You don't know, okay. So, if I talk about any of those things and you want me to explain, stop me, I'll be very happy to explain. My assumption is, all the questions for CK, Mark is your man, okay? He'll be after me. And for FHE and TE, I'll take the question, FHE and MPC. Actually, his PhD thesis is an MPC, so you can get hold of him unofficially. But if you want to ask a question, I'm happy to answer. So, this is my initial thought, okay? Just my initial thoughts. So how can an LLM increase the hyper risk, right? So there's like a whole bunch of ways to doing this. So one of the things that you typically find in all so-called X-risk kind of scenario is this construct of dual research, okay? So dual research means you have some technology. I'm pretty sure you heard about dual use technologies. So satellites, for example, right? So you could use it for one thing or the other thing. And the other bit that LLMs can really help is lab automation. Like literally, if you were walking into a lab and you get stuck, you go to ChatGPT and say, help me get this sequencer. How do I reboot this sequencer? Okay, that's how what an LLM could do for you. And of course, the obvious one, just like now you ask a question. You know, you were one of the members of the Om Shikiaro cult. Do you remember that one? The Japanese cult that actually did one of the very early biological attacks? Yeah, okay. So, you know, imagine them sitting right next to a machine and you have ChatGPT or Claude or, you know, Grok running. You know, you go, you know what? I want to actually do this attack on Tokyo Tube. Explain to me how I do it. That's the next one, right? I'm just giving you, like, please don't do any of those things. I'm just giving you a thought experiment, okay? Full disclosure. Yeah, I mean, so my objective function here is to give you an intuition of what the threat is and get more of your time to think about how we could prevent that, right? I want to really reset your norm that the first of the premises was until now, everybody, including Anthropic, has been thinking we are in ASL 2. And my talk here is all to make you convinced that we are not in ASL 2, we are in ASL 3 the very least. And we really need to think about how to manage this risk. And I am trying to convince you there's enough of cryptographic mechanisms and cryptoeconomic mechanisms that's available to us today. It will be foolish of us not to use it. That's all I'm hoping to do. So if anybody does anything, I fully disclaim all of them. Please don't do anything. Okay, right. So indirect risk, right? So I would say most of this is very, very familiar to most of you. So misinformation and disinformation. I'm pretty sure if you have watched the news, there's been this exchange of weaponry between India and Pakistan. And I'm pretty sure you've seen enough of LLM-generated videos of, you know, different things being shot down and different things burning. So, you know, LLM can do the same thing for all the stuff that we are interested, right? Well, and the next bit, radicalization stroke manipulation. Same question, right? We can take the same Indian context. Just have a slice of people who are from India who get, you know, upset if they hear a bit of whatever they need to hear. And imagine an LLM want to radicalize somebody. I'm pretty sure that could be done, right? And then last of it is like, we have poisoning in the information space, right? This can also happen in the space of sequences. And that's what data poisoning would imply, right? So you could think of papers that you actually have, right? We've reached a space where not just tweets are created by LLMs. LLMs can create papers. Imagine an adversarial LLM wants to prevent progress in a particular space where it intersects what we are interested in. It could absolutely create a bunch of papers and put it out there. And that's just poisoning. Okay, so, all right. Again, full disclosure, this is a thought experiment. I'm not giving you ideas to go do any of those things. If you do, it's your risk, not mine. So, automation of threats, right? So, it's a very interesting thing to think about. So, what I mean by this is, like, you could start up a bunch of agents, and each of these agents could globally, I'm just giving you a scenario. So, you are a nutcase of some case, and you want to attack a bunch of all sequences globally. You go to an LLM, you stand up an LLM, or the LLM by itself stand up a bunch of agents, and each of the agents start doing the thing globally. So your possible success rate increases exponentially, right? That's the automation of threats. Then there is like a man-in-the-middle kind of attack, which is like essentially what this means is like you're sending something to a sequencer, you're sat in the middle, you go, I get a sequence of E. coli being sent through, and the LLM takes it and goes, okay, whatever, you choose COVID or whatever else you want, Ebola, whatever else on the other side, right? So you, as in the person who actually put in the request, is literally saying, you know what, let's be fair, let's think about viruses, right? So imagine you were thinking about a phage virus for E. coli, right? You send the sequence across, LLM sat in the middle, goes, you know what, I don't fancy this today, I just want to take Ebola and change it slightly, make it more viral, and then send it to the other side. That's a man-in-the-middle attack in that sense of speaking, right? So cyber attacks on biolabs, as I was describing, quite trivial, right? There you go. I hope I gave you a glimpse of what we can expect if LLMs were to gang up with a bunch of Vamshikya or tribe set of people, where the world would be. Right. Okay, so there are other problems as well. So what I mean by this is like, in the world of biology, there are a set of things which you could consider as information hazards. What I mean by this, that's just the fact that you know it increases your risk, right? So you could think of, I don't know, you decide what sequence you consider a risk. Maybe Ebola could be a risk, maybe not. You know, make a list of all the diseases that you could use as a biological weapon in that sense, and get the sequence of that. You might not want to release any of it. And given all these things, because you want to have actions for most of them, you store their sequences in various labs. So information leak could be literally you want, or the LLM, or the set of the LLM plus the other bits, want to actually leak the information that's being stored through some means, right? So typically all enterprises have something, what we describe, called data loss prevention. That's called DLP in short. It prevents you from sending emails. So if you've ever been in a corporate job and you want to send an email out, then something pops up and you can't send this PDF attachment because, you know, doesn't meet the policy. So all of this exists, and you can bypass it pretty easily. So LLM could actually easily make that happen. So yeah, I mean, how can you actually make a research go away, right? Again, same thing. I'm pretty sure it could come up with far more interesting ways than I've thought about. I'm sure if you just ask one of your favorite LLM the question, they will give you better answers. Then last of the bits, bio to cyber risk. And this is the bit that where I started thinking about and ended up with where I was. So it's exploiting genomic software by, okay, so think of it this way. Have you ever used PostScript? Anybody use LaTeX? Okay, right, okay. So you recognize PostScript as a real proper language. You can write a virus in PostScript. Okay, all right. It doesn't seem to really resonate with anybody. Okay, so guys, so there is this language that actually allows you to render everything that you see on any printer. It's called PostScript. And when you write LaTeX, you can actually do LaTeX to PostScript and PostScript to PDF, right? So this PostScript, which is an intermediate language, which is a real language, PostScript version 5 or 6, I don't know what it is, but you can write viruses in this thing. So this is the same situation. You could actually attack, okay, devices through the sequence. You get what I'm saying, right? There you go. So at least one person got it. I'm happy at least one person got it. I know this is very early in the morning. I'm switching between so many topics and trying to explain things to you really fast. I only have an hour. I'll try my level best. You can find me afterwards. I will show you how to do it. Sorry, no. I'm not going to show you how to do it, but at least I'll show you how to. Yes. I can definitely show you how to do that in PostScript. Right, okay. So now this is the most interesting part, right? The most interesting part is how could we actually reduce our risk, right? So to start with, you could do this, which is like, for every sequence stuff that happens, can you have a universal screening? Again, there are people in the room who would say to us that that's probably privacy invasive, but we have to have trade-offs, and we have ZKs, and he will talk about ZKs, and I will do a very simple intro to ZKs. And the other bit you want to do is you want to really do evaluation of tools before you ever release them, right? So if you think about Anthropic, they actually do. Again, see, I gave you the example of Anthropic, and I showed you that they now describe their LLMs to be in level 2. And now I also give you the path by which with a level 2 I can get to level 3, okay? So yeah, there we are. So security for labs, how can you actually make it more rigorous? And the things that's more interesting in that sense is like, I would say trusted synthesis and anomaly detection, right? What I mean by trusted synthesis is like if you put in a sequence into a sequencer, you are given cryptographic assurances that whatever you get on the other side is what you put in. That's what it is. And anomaly detection typically means like, if you know this is the norm, if anybody does something out of the norm, you put a trigger out. So what this means is like, imagine you have a lab and there's a bunch of people who work on E. coli, and then suddenly somebody starts searching or working on anything like Ebola. Yes, both starts with E, but the two are different. One is a bacteria, other is a virus, and suddenly you put your hand up and say, okay, there's something happening here. We have some slight problem. Okay, and everybody, when they talk about all of this, they bring in this construct of trusted science. It's a difficult topic, and I'm not going to say that I am an expert in any of that, but it's an interesting construct. My understanding of science is like science is trusted, quote unquote. So effectively what that means is you have to ensure data integrity. So I'm pretty sure there are lots of people who work with Research Hub and other people who actually wanted to show data integrity in research. And then also do fraud, tampering, and hacking in the scientific work, right? So all of this is standard stuff. Yeah, I'm going to just get on with life. Okay, so given I talked about term trusted, I have to then go into the real world. And I'm going to ask one of the questions. How many people in this room actually have Windows machines? Okay. Are you running 10 or 11? 11. Okay, your machine actually has TPMs. You actually have this thing in your machine. I have people in the room who actually have this thingy in the machine. Okay? So I have an Infineon chip over there, but that's not how it normally looks. This is an older version. So what this does is like, there's a whole bunch of variants. Most likely you're going to have an Intel one or an AMD one. Because it's like, ARM trust zone, I don't think is fully supported in Windows yet, as far as I know. So the idea here is like, you have a piece of hardware that allows you to store some things. And so this could be your private keys in that sense. And it could actually sign things on your behalf, decrypt things on your behalf. And you can actually be assured that whatever it does is actually as per it has agreed to before. That's the whole idea of attestation. If you really want to, I can hand wave more, but like just imagine there's a piece of hardware in your machine that actually gives you attestation to certain characteristics that you can attest remotely, right? You can actually have dynamic or static attestation. So static attestation means like you have to start the process when you really start. So like when you switch on the machine, the whole process has to start. And from then on, you're able to attest whatever you're doing. So you could actually prove to somebody very remote that on your machine, you're running a calculator, right? Your normal calculator, and 2 + 2 = 4. And they could be assured that 2 + 2 = 4, you actually did the calculation. That's the simplest way to describe it. That's trusted computing for you. So if you get really interested and you're bored and you don't want to sleep, I will strongly recommend you, it's not that long, like 22 pages or something, but it gives you like a high-level idea of what it is. Then, of course, there's the magic that Mark is going to talk about. It's called zero knowledge. And it is like 3 properties, and I really love these properties. The first 2 are the 2 that I really, really like. Zero knowledgeness is the fact that, nobody really, the other party doesn't know exactly what it is. But the 2 things that are really interesting is completeness and soundness. So imagine there's a 2-party protocol in that sense. The completeness and soundness is the fact that as long as you tell the truth, the other party will be convinced. And the other bit is like the other party could be assured that you'll be telling the truth in that sense. So these are the 2 properties to me that's of the highest value for everybody. And in this instance, it's highest value for doing trusted science or surveillance or things of that sort. So you could be assured that, I'm assuming you're using the computational models or the probabilistic models. So with a very, very, very low probability that even though you don't know what the hell is happening in that machine, you're assured that what they're doing is what they agree with you. Right. So there's another tool that you could apply. And okay, quick question. Does anybody know Vlad? Anybody in here knows Vlad Samfir? Yeah. Okay. Right. Right. Okay. Good. So, he's one of the guys who was early involved in the whole Ethereum ecosystem, and he came up with this phraseology and a bunch of things. So essentially, I think it's being defined. I don't know if he defined it, but this is what I found. A formal discipline that studies protocols that govern production, distribution, consumption of goods and services. And the key phrase is decentralized digital economy. And having said this, I actually went to Wikipedia and checked what economics, the definition of economics is. So social science concerns chiefly with the description and analysis of production, distribution, consumption of goods and services. But, it's the tool we have, right? So it's like a bastardized child of cryptography and economics. So that's cryptoeconomics for you. So essentially what happens is like, when you have a whole bucket of tools that you have, I kind of gave you a flavor of TEs. Mark is going to talk about GKs. There's some other bits called MPC. Oh, no, I'm going to skip that one, right? Okay, I'll talk about this a bit. So you can actually do this two ways. You don't absolutely always have to have, cryptoeconomic mechanisms and decentralization. You can also use TEs. That's why I mentioned TEs to everybody. Oh, my bracket is missing. Interesting. Okay, so in a centralized thing, one of the things you need to do is you need to trust the manufacturer. Unfortunately, yes. You have to trust. Which is the big, not ASML, which is the biggest? TSMC, there you go, thank you. So if you don't trust TSMC, we are all done. Like pretty much all the sub 3 nanometer in the world is pretty much done by them. So if you don't trust them, we are gone. We can always say, you know what, we have a decentralized whatever that is. But believe me, like if they actually do your CPUs, you're so done, irrespective of whatever the trust model you have, right? So just being fair to everybody. Then if you were to compare, the thing is like, you can have some confidentiality. The confidentiality in TE is much more easy to prove because it's like you can actually have enclaves and everything will stay there. Whereas in a decentralized manner, we have to do a lot of heavy lifting. We have to do all the fancy mathematics and prove and various things. And the last of the bit that most people who at least have interest in decentralization, that they'll be very, very keen on is this arbitrary censorship resistance thing. And I normally go, you know what? How many nodes do you have on your L1? If it's less than 10, good luck, right? But if that's the argument, then we don't have to go there. But if the argument is we have enough of nodes that we could actually have some sense of censorship resistance, yes, this is a valid argument, right? If the nodes are run by, again, look, don't get me wrong. If AWS hosts your RPC endpoints, then whatever you talk about in terms of decentralization, it doesn't matter. I'm so sorry for you, but that's what it is. You have to truly have decentralized infrastructure, which is not sat on AWS, for you to get the censorship resistance. I will go one step further and say the obvious. So if OFAC were to actually introduce a sanction list, and you are a staker in Ethereum, or for that matter, any L1, and you happen to be in the US, or your service providers happen to be in the US, remember I just mentioned the magical word AWS, so that will give you a very tricky spot. So your argument for censorship resistance might be interesting. Okay, let me continue. So adversaries and how you normally think about them, but ask Mark the questions, a good place to start. This is a good paper, rather longish, but gives you like a pretty good idea. And okay, so now I'm going to start working about how we could actually think about solving some of those problems, right? So you could actually have the combination of TEs and FHEs, and you can actually do some secure computation. So you have TEs that allow you secure computation to a degree, and then your data confidentiality requirement could be met by FHEs. So how many minutes do I have, Yash? Oh, okay, all right, fine. Okay, so you might ask me what could be the application. So I could say you have some sensitive biological data, right? So in this instance, let's imagine you want to create, I don't know, some okay, let's imagine I want to run a bunch of tests on some new variants of Ebola, right? So I have a sequence of Ebola, and I'm looking at the possible, new variants that come out, and I really don't want the sequence of Ebola to be in public. So if that's a scenario, I could have a combination of TEs and FHEs, and I can get the results. And then you can also have ZKs plus MPC in that sense. So essentially, you could actually prove another set of characteristics. You can actually validate biosecurity compliance without exposing the data, right? Because you can actually run ZK on what you have, and you can actually have a ZK plus MPC to validate that whatever your claims are true. So just giving you a couple of examples. So like, why this could be interesting for us, and why at least some of the possible threat vectors could be bounded by use of these tools. Okay, again, another of these things. So when you combine TEs plus ZK, so the thing with TE is like once your trust assumption is kind of agreed upon, then TEs give you a slightly, how could I say, low lift. What I mean by low lift is like the amount of effort you require to create all the proofs and validate everything will become a bit lower, right? So here you could actually have like a assurances against man-in-the-middle attacks. Say, for example, imagine you have a sequencer, you run a TE, and then you can have a ZK against it. So TE will give you the assurance of the sequencer's security, and the ZK will prove to you that this is what it's supposed to be doing. Right? And you could also apply for a good measure some cryptoeconomic stuff. I wouldn't bore you with that. Okay, so okay, this is an interesting one. This is an interesting one in the sense like, imagine you have a bunch of labs working together to get a result, right? And you don't want to breach privacy in that sense. And how could you do this? So MPC plus FHE, it's multi-party computing plus fully homomorphic encryption, you can actually do this. So you can actually do a collaborative analysis of threats and then prove to everybody that you're all playing the game fairly. And okay, so I think I will show you the next slide and then work backwards. So just for the heck of this, I just want to give you like, in an imaginary world, you have a bunch of scenarios and you want to look at what is it that you have on your toolkit that you could actually deploy so that you can get the throughput that you require. So, different things that you actually do in a lab will have different throughput. So you might have like, low throughput things, which essentially means like you're doing sequencing or you're doing PCR. So it's like 90 minutes kind of thing. So if that's the kind of thing, you could just literally go for like pure ZK and you can actually do the final state verification. You could have a combination of MPC plus ZK and then, you get some other assumptions, which is like, you can have threshold honesty in that sense. And then your throughput will be medium. And then, you almost have a real-time throughput that you really want. And then you could probably go back and try the TE plus FHE kind of thing, right? Again, the trust assumption is that you have to trust cryptography and, of course, TSMC and SML and everybody else. So, and then the last of the kitchen sink is everything that you actually can imagine. And pretty much you could have a variable throughput, right? And you could pretty much think about I would say any of the mission critical workflows that you want, and you could provide resistance to that. That would be my 2 cents worth of thinking. And I would probably go back to this and kind of give you like an example for how you could think about it. So I was just literally saying, given any random threat you have, high throughput, medium throughput, and low throughput, or a variable one, you can actually get from your kitchen sink of cryptographic primitives and cryptoeconomics, you can put something together to reduce the risk. none of those things give you an assurance that's going to be stopped, but it gives you the ability to reduce the risk. So if you were think about the risk scenario of dual use research, as I was saying, you can have a TE plus ZK, and you could then provide the proof that, okay, given the TE is still not broken, you still have assurance. Then we talked about the lab automation hijacking, remember that one? So you could say FHE plus MPC, you can actually do that, right? So I'm just giving you the things I described previously as to like how you could make this hybrid attacks possible. And I'm saying, if you have this tooling, you might be able to prevent that. And this question about synthesis blacklist diversion. So essentially, if you had a global blacklist of all sequences that you're not allowed to, and LLM plus cyber plus whatever you want to bypass it, how do you prevent that? And then you could actually have ZK validated stuff plus TE whitelist, and you'd be able to prevent that as well. And the research database about that I kind of mentioned. Yes, there's lots of things you could do. You can get some cryptographic assurances, but BCP, DR plus MPC based backup and ZK data provenance should do the trick for you. So hopefully, I gave you like a bit of a flavor of what's possible and a bit of a flavor of the tools that's available. And yeah, I woke you up, I hope at least. And I hope I kind of convinced you that we are in Anthropic's level 3 security, level 3 state rather than level 2 state. I'm done. Thank you, guys. Happy to take questions if you have any. Yeah, here comes the mic.
I had a brief question about TEs and like how would you make, you're basically trusting that TSMC produces the chip correctly.
Not just that. Okay, I'll provide you with a possible solution. You could actually have, actually me and Mark suggested a solution to somebody else, a known L1. So you could have a set of providers of a TE. So you remember I had in my TE slide like a bunch of people providing TEs, right? So for you to actually then compromise all of them, that'll be, okay, so Intel plus AMD plus ARM plus RISC-V Keystone plus Apple, right? Mm-hmm. And you then have a honest majority by some distribution. Then you have this ability, you have to do this by breaking the protocol of all the different people and breaking the implementation for all the different people, assuming they're all not being made and use the same supply chain, but that's the assumption.
I was thinking more like altering the very chip itself, the hardware itself.
Oh, that's literally you can do. So it's almost impossible for you, and this is why I said TSMC, if TSMC were being malicious, it's almost impossible for you to figure that one out. Because they could actually, in the layers, they can embed something there. In the microcode, they can enable it. And that would not be picked up by anybody in that sense. So if they actually do one on us.
Yeah, so I was like interested in building a particular chip myself, and I was talking to this person, I forgot his name, but in Berkeley he said, you don't necessarily have to use a 3 nanometer from TSMC, but just I don't know, a 100 nanometer chip.
Yeah, it's fine.
And
you can even use FPGAs, right? So you could just get a random FPGA and you can program it, right?
But yeah, but then something interesting that he suggested I didn't think of is you could produce like a batch of 100 of these chips.
Yeah, and you can randomly select out of that, yeah.
And then send them to different labs, and then the labs would confirm, does the circuit match what you, and you dissect the chip. Like,
but it's very hard to do, okay? So imagine you take a chip and you cut through, imagine 100 nanometer. There is always these variations, right? Mm-hmm. So the variation essentially is like the difference between a malicious action versus an error is very hard to prove. Mm-hmm. Your question is, can I prove? Is the question, right? Mm-hmm. That's the difficulty. So, even if it works 100 times, one time and doesn't work, the difference between that and truly random, you might have to do like a dice test or something like that to do normal distribution. Otherwise, It might be doing sampling. It might be doing side channel attacks. Your side channel attacks won't be visible on your, you slice it, you put it on a scanning electron microscope, you see everything, but all the bits that are there, you could have like 2 sets of circuits and doing like a clock attack, right? It's not visible to you. So it's like very, very, it's almost impossible. And this is why US is like, bejesus scared about 5G stuff and other things, that they wouldn't put certain, like if you go back and look at the hardware that's used by mill standard, you will recognize the amount of rigor they put in to make sure attacks don't happen. So I'll give you a good example, a simple example. This is public known information that, in your keyboard, there's like a microcontroller there, right? That microcontroller encodes for everybody that's here. When you press the button on a machine, it sends a thing message so that the screen shows you whatever you press. So there's a microcontroller inside it, and there was malicious code embedded inside that one, right? So it's impossible to actually provide supply chain provenance for every piece of your hardware. It becomes harder and harder and harder. So,
What if you in an open source manner, you create your own circuit with like a Raspberry Pis or something like that, and give it as a construction kit to somebody else, and then they would have to assemble it in a certain way.
Okay, I'm going to challenge you with, let's think this through as a thought experiment. Number one, you're assuming Raspberry Pi doesn't have, I know Simon and I know all these guys, and I've been in this ecosystem very long, you can see my talks. But the assumption is like a lot of them don't have the competence to actually defensively design things, right? Designing is different from defensively designing things, right? You could design something and I could have a massive side channel, right? So side channel essentially means something simple as this. So when you have, connect your oscilloscope to the chipset and you have 2 numbers being multiplied, right? And you're just seeing the drop of voltages. 0 into 0, right? You will know that 0 into 0 is the thing that's being multiplied. And 1, 1, 1, 1 into 1, 1, 1, 1. You do that, you definitely see the difference between 0 into 0 and 1, the whole bit field being 1 versus into 1, 1, 1, right? So that's the thing that you need to really be assured. And the reason I say this is, I don't know if you know this, this kind of attacks was known in PKCS1. This is going back like 20 years. So PKCS1 was the RSA signature scheme. We had to fix it, and we had 1.1, 1.2, whatever it is. And you could say this same attack, timing attack, happened to Zcash. Hello, you know what I mean? I hope you understand what I'm saying to you, right? So this is a revisit of this thing. So essentially all this means is when you have certain computation happen, you don't actually do the full computation, you give the result back, it's the way the CPU is optimized, but you don't want to be happening. It's like somebody who's actually not knowing the key or the key material being allowed to get 1 bit of extra information without going through a security model. This is a challenge, and this is a real challenge. And our challenge is the following, that we are in a society where we, as an average human, don't have the competence to even understand like 99.99% of what we are consuming, let alone defensively think about it. And the only thing that could enable you to do that are the LLMs. That implies the thing that I was describing to you. So your threat is multiplied by orders of magnitude. So if you have been sleeping really well yesterday night, tonight, welcome to the real world.